one of my successors at NATO famously said, if the Russians stop fighting, there will be peace. If the Ukrainians stop fighting, there will be no Ukraine.
We can get the thoughts now of Lord Robertson, George Robertson, former Secretary General of NATO. George, good afternoon to you. George Robertson, do we have you on the line?
Well, you should have me on the line.
We've got you now. I can hear you, and I can clear. Hopefully, you can hear me. George, welcome to the programme.
Yeah, nice to speak to you again, John.
Okay, good to have you here, George. Look, so we've now heard from the Prime Minister, reaffirmed, as it were, on that transatlantic flight into New York City, that Britain, the United Kingdom government, will exceed or maintain its commitment to Ukraine in the coming year. It's now running at about £2.3 billion worth of support in aid and in munitions. That is an important statement, George, is it not?
It is, and I agree with it very strongly. And there is no distinction between the government and the opposition on supporting President Zelensky and in the fight by the Ukrainians to save their homeland. And I'm very glad that the Prime Minister has reaffirmed today that the UK government will continue to give the kind of military support and supplies that the Ukrainians clearly need and can use so effectively.
Yeah, if you were back there as as NATO Secretary General now, George, it would be a big part of your job. And for that matter, if you were doing your old job of Defence Secretary, you would be doing a lot, or all you could do to stiffen the resolve of Ukraine's allies. Is it your impression now, looking at it, as it were, from just outside that inner circle, that the resolve of the allies in the West is where it should be, is as strong as it should be, and has the, enormously successful counter-offensive by the Ukraine military, will that have stiffened that resolve, do you think?
I think one of the things that has surprised and shocked President Putin and the close group that he's got round about him has been the degree of unity that there has been among the allies, among the Europeans, and the strength of the bond between Europe and the United States at this time. I think he clearly set out at the beginning of this horrible exercise to see whether he could divide Europe and divide Europe from the United States. And just as he tried to stop the onward march of NATO membership and has now seen that Finland and Sweden are going to join the alliance, he has been frustrated and has failed in the objective of splitting the allies. So the strength of feeling that still exists and the amount of equipment that the Ukrainians are getting will certainly have surprised President Putin, and I think will make him and his colleagues very worried indeed.
Yes, I mean, but is the Western alliance, if I could call it that, is that as strong as it appears at first glance? And we saw just the other day the foreign minister of Ukraine, and I'm going to be speaking to a former prime minister of Ukraine on the programme a bit later on. But the foreign minister was rebuking Germany for failing to back up the earlier rhetoric of giving Ukraine what it needs by way of military supply. So Ukraine doesn't feel it's been getting quite the support that it would wish to have. And there have been questions in this or that member of the alliance, in Germany certainly, sometimes in France and elsewhere.
Well, I can understand the frustration of the Ukrainians who want more and more equipment at the present time. They're in the front line and they want a lot more. But I think they're being slightly unfair. The Germans have changed their whole foreign and defence policy as a consequence of the invasion of Ukraine. They're giving very substantial help at the moment. And of course, in terms of cancelling the amount of oil and gas that they get from Russia, the German people are going to be paying a very hefty price for supporting Ukraine at this time. So generally speaking, if you add America and the European contribution, it's very, very considerable indeed. And that degree of unity is one of the most important features of this whole conflict.
Yes.
And one that I think rattles the guys in the Kremlin most.
What, though, in your judgment, does victory for Ukraine look like? I mean, Volodymyr Zelensky is in the business of rallying his people, presenting a strong and united front and a positive picture to the world. But is it, in your view, conceivable that Russia could be driven back, not just back past the point before the February invasion, but even back past the point of the 2014 incursion, so that Ukraine regains Crimea, with all that means to Russia, including an enormously important base at Sebastopol? Do you think that is possible?
I can't say at the moment what's going to happen, because that'll be determined by events that are way outside of our control and way outside of our foreseeing. What I do know is that the determination of the Ukrainians is much greater than it is among the troops, the Russian troops who are on the ground today. And the very fact that they are making territorial advances is what I think is leading to, for example, the statement today by President Erdogan of Turkey, who, having come back from a long conversation with President Putin in Uzbekistan in the last couple of days, is now saying that Putin wants to end this war very quickly and may be willing to do so. Well, I think we should be very suspicious of that. One of my successors at NATO famously said, if the Russians stop fighting, there will be peace. If the Ukrainians stop fighting, there will be no Ukraine. I think people should remember that. And if President Erdogan is right, and President Putin is now beginning, to read the runes, he had Prime Minister Modi of India and President Xi of China both expressing serious concerns to him at that Shanghai Cooperation Council meeting, then it may well be that we're beginning to see the tide turn. I wouldn't go as far as to say that just yet, but it's beginning to look like that.
Yeah, interesting. And as if and when, George, it comes to some sort of talks on peace, the evidence that we're now seeing each day of mass killings in occupied territory, the torture that has taken place, the atrocities that have taken place, they will surely colour the terms of those talks, won't they?
Well, the nature of war crimes is going to colour any aftermath, as will indeed the rebuilding of Ukraine. You cannot possibly see the destruction on the level that the Russians have impacted on Ukraine without worrying about the cost that will be involved in reinstating it and getting people back to their normal homes again. So that is something that we'll have to meet further down the line. But in the short term, we've got to make sure that they've got the means of defeating the Russians on the ground in their own land. And that's what's got to be the priority just now.
Okay, George, it's good to talk to you. Thank you for joining us on the programme this afternoon. That's Lord Robertson, the former Secretary General of NATO, speaking to us there.